Hi, welcome back to Mary's Eclectic Interests. I'm Diana Rogers. We're going to keep going this time and talk a little bit more about creating a fairy garden. Last session we talked about a lot of the basics, a lot of the design components, all the things that you need to think about or at least know about so that when you're putting your garden together, it has a pleasing, interesting look. This time, we're going to actually do some, and we'll use some of those components too. We're going to start with something very basic and very simple. This is just a round plastic container. I have, and I'm going to peel this back, I have filled this with soil. And remember we talked about our tools and the potato smasher. This is used, I used it right in here to get the soil down. It's also a good idea if you're going to use real plants, live plants, to put some good quality soil in there. If you're not, then just whatever you've got works really well. Pat it down. What I'm going to do with this one in my plan, I've decided I want moss on top of it, and I want the moss to be a little bit bigger than the plant, so it kind of, or the pot, so it kind of hangs over. Now, in order to do that, I have kind of jerry-rigged and cut the moss up. One thing that works really well to work easier with moss, because you're going to have pieces. For example, here's a chunk right here. Spray bottle. Wet it down. Moss is very resilient and it's very forgiving. If you wet it down, what'll happen is, let me finish this little spot. So this is a seam right here. But what'll happen is it gets all wet, you mush it together, and when it dries, it stays where you put it. So if you want to create a hill, which we're going to do in a little bit on another one, but if you want to do a hill, you can do the same thing. And then when it dries, it gives that same shape. So I put a little bit of water on it so that I could make sure it was bigger than the pot, which is what I wanted it to do. Now, I've chosen a centerpiece or a center focal point of this house. And I want to put it where it's kind of to the back, because I want this all area to be the primary space that you see all the other components in. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this house. The texture of the roof, if you look at this, you know it's a little prickly. It's got leaves on it, or leaf-like things on it, so you can feel from a texture perspective that it's a little bit prickly. There's a cardinal at the top here, so there's a bird theme going to happen with this. And if you turn the house around, remember with fairy gardening, when you're looking to buy pieces, it's about the details. So if you look at the back of this, the chimney has some of the stucco peeled off, and you can see the brick underneath it. Same thing back here. The sides have the windows along with window boxes. The front looks like a tree, and it has the birds across the top too. And if you look really closely on the door opens and it has a cardinal as a door handle. So again, take a look and look for those details when you're looking at your fairy garden items. Okay, so we got the house kind of in place. I'm actually not going to center it. I'm going to set it over just a little bit like that. Okay, so we have our centerpiece. Now I want to take off on the theme. So I found a chair that's got a cardinal on it. So I'm going to put that over here. Okay, and I may have to turn this around so I can see what it looks like. I found a birdhouse that's got cardinal on it, and it's picking up the other colors of the birds that are on here too. So from a color perspective, this is great. And remember, we talked about using the awl as a tool, put a hole in it, and then pop it right in there and swing it around. Okay. So I want to create some movement in this fairy garden, in this pot. So I'm going to actually put a pathway in. So it's going to go outside the door, and these happen to be squares. I'm going to put them at a bit of an angle, okay, so that they are not straight on. And again, that's going to create some movement. And I'm going to go kind of at an angle here. I'm going to angle it over so that it goes over near the chair. Okay, so you get those all in place and kind of push them down just a little bit so they stay put. Okay, so now we have our centerpiece. We've got the movement, so you can kind of see that I didn't divide it straight in half. I made it a little bit at a curve. So now I want to work on this side over here. So I've got a sign that says Dreams in Flight, which is birds in flight, dreams in flight. And I'm going to put this a little bit further down the front. Okay, and I'm not going to leave it too tall. I want it actually a little bit lower, so I'm going to stick it down a little bit further in there. This is a really cool little house, but I want to have a pet in there too. So I've got a dog house, again, that matches the color. It's white, so again, the contrasting color matches the chair, and then the roof is the same color as the roof on the house. And then I have my dog right there, okay? So I've got the dog house and the bowl that goes with it and the dog. I'm going to put some fairies in here now. So I've got a fairy that has got the blue in it that matches the blue on the excuse me, on the birdhouse or bird feeder, and I'm going to set her. She's a sitting fairy, so I could put her down, or I'm going to set her actually right in the chair. Now, if this were actually going to go outside, what I might do is get a little glue dot or a little touch of glue and put that on her bottom piece, and then so that she will stay in. She's fine right here. I'm also going to put in Macy. This is this particular fairy's name is Macy, and I'm going to put her in right over here. Now she's got the red and the yellow and the green, again, like the birds on the front. Okay. Now, I also want to soften this a little bit. Bring in a little bit more red, kind of highlight the cardinals. So I have some silk flowers here that I'm going to use. Now, these are going to be a little bit bigger flowers than what from a scale perspective would be good, but watch what happens when I clip that off, and I'm going to put this right here. It doesn't look too big, does it? It looks like it blends right in, it adds the color, and then I'm going to repeat that on a little bit smaller scale on the other side of the house right over in here. So this is a taller one, and this one's smaller because we've got the bird feeder right there. And then I have all these other fun little pieces that I can take, and this one actually is what I want. And I'm going to put this down by the sign. Try to get it in without using the awl, but we'll see. No, that's not going to work. Okay, here. So if you look at this, your eye will catch the red. You'll be able to see that it's clearly cardinals, right? And then you'll see the red up here, and then it'll carry right on through down there. Now I can also do one little one right to the edge of the chair here. Make the hole, stick it in, and then kind of lean it a little bit. There. So we've got texture, we've got color, we've got the different heights in here too. We've got the movement of it. The scale also is good. So, and we've got the movement pieces right over in here as well. So this session, we're going to talk about what do you do when you don't want to put soil in the bottom. For example, something like this. This has no drainage. I don't want to put it outside. There's no holes or anything in the bottom. I want it to be more of an indoor fairy garden on my patio, or on my porch, I mean. So what you can do with this is, instead of putting soil in here, which is going to prematurely rust the metal, you can use styrofoam. So this is a piece of styrofoam, and I cut it to fit here. Now, excuse me, the best kind of styrofoam to use is insulation styrofoam. You can get it at a home improvement store. And the reason I like this better than any kind of a styrofoam you could get at a craft store is because this is more solid. It's not as messy. So you won't have a lot of these little white things hanging all over when you're trying to cut it. It's easier to cut. Use a knife, an X-Acto knife or a box opener knife, and you can use, it works easier. So in this particular case, I actually had to do 2 layers in order to get it to be the height that I wanted. I could have just done 1 layer and made the fairy garden down lower in the bed of the wagon, but I wanted it really higher, so I actually did 2. Make sure your styrofoam fits in there, but not snugly, because what we're going to do with this is we're going to put moss on top of it, and we need a place to be able to tuck the moss in. Okay? Now, let's talk about moss for just a couple of minutes. There's a couple of different kinds of moss. There is, most of it has backing on it, if I can get that. Most of it has backing on it. Some of it will have adhesive on it, and some just will have the basic backing. I'll show you a couple of tricks on it. This has just got backing on it. There's no adhesive on it. I could use adhesive on this, but if you get moss that has an adhesive, you do not want to use it on dirt because all it's going to stick to is dirt or soil. So you want to make sure that you have the right kind of moss for the right task. So I'm going to peel this off. I pre-cut this into the right size for what I want to do for my fairy garden, okay? So I'm going to get rid of this. Peel the backing off. Don't leave the backing on. That's more to protect it, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set it on here, make sure I have enough of an edge around it to be able to tuck it in so that it's fully, so that the the styrofoam is fully covered. So I made it big enough to be able to do that. I set it in there, and this is where your fork comes in really handy, okay? So what you're going to want to do is just take it and tuck it down in there, okay? Just like this. And you're going to have to go back a couple times around in order to get the moss tucked all the way down in. Again, if you have a container, for example, that has an edging here where you can see the edge, so it's not like this, but it's a pot or a basket or whatever where you might be able to see the styrofoam, you're going to want to make sure that your moss is long enough to be able to cover into, or to be able to go down in there. Okay, now when you get into corners, and I should have done this here, hang on, got to have my scissors again. So when you get into the corners, you're going to want to cut it just like that, like you were, so you can tuck it in safely and easily, just like that, and like that. Okay, so we're going to tuck this in all the way around, tuck it down in there. And again, you don't want your styrofoam to be so tight fitting that you can't fit the moss down in there. Okay? Now moss it's a synthetic, so there's nothing natural really about the moss in terms of, it's not real moss, it's actually a synthetic, and it will fade over time. Now you can use moss outdoors if you want to, which I do frequently in my gardens, just because growing moss is more of a challenge than I want to deal with. However, if you have an area that is on the north-facing side of your house or wherever, or your apartment or whatever, and you want to use real moss, you can get moss to grow. And you have to make sure that it is, sorry about that, get that in there. You have to make sure that it is natural to your area and that it gets lots and lots of water. That's the key thing, shade and water. Okay, all right. That side is being a little more stubborn than it should be, but we'll go ahead with this anyway. Okay, so once you use your fork and get your moss tucked in there, I probably would pull this out and cut it just a little bit more, but we're gonna move on. Gives you an idea of how you can do this. All right, and then you got your moss nice and settled in there. Now, I have picked out a gate. Now, this particular planter, this particular wagon is too small to put a house in. It would take over and kind of be the whole thing. So I found a gate that I really like. And I have a place that I'm going to put this where it sits kind of sideways like this. So the front would be toward me, which I'm going to go ahead and do here. So I'm going to go ahead and build this as if this is the front and how it's going to set, because that's going to determine where my gate goes. So my gate is actually a 3-piece gate. 2 of the pieces are hooked together. But here's the thing. It's on stakes here, which is great because it keeps it in place, but they're going to be too long. It's not going to work. So I'm going to take my wire cutter and I'm going to cut it down just a little bit so that it fits into the wagon and stays put, right, without it being too long. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to center this, and it's going to be a 3-piece gate. So there's 1 piece, 2 pieces, and then here's the 3rd piece right here. And I'm going to open the gate. Okay, so I'm going to turn this around and work it from the back side now. But there's my front. There's the front. So you can see I've got the gate as kind of the main centerpiece here. I'm going to make this into a seating area, something that's kind of nice and calm and gives that calm feeling. So I'm going to put a table and chairs in here. And again, I'm cutting off the stems so that they don't get down too far. There's the table, iris table, And then it's got 2 chairs. Okay. All righty. You kind of want to walk through that gate, don't you? Walk through the gate, just sit down. Okay, to continue on with the theme, I am going to put in a sign that says, "Welcome to my garden." Okay, and I'm going to insert that over here. Kind of turn it a little bit. You know what? No, I'm not. I don't see. This is where you can put stuff in and then decide, no, you know what? That's not the right place. I'm going to put it elsewhere. I'm going to do some stones, Zen stones, that says love, peace, tranquility. Again, smiling as we go along. Welcome to my garden. And then I have a gazing globe that I'm going to put right over in here. All right. So I have the basics of my garden. I've got the container. It's not going to go outside, so the foam works well. The moss on top, the key pieces so that I have some texture. But you'll notice from a layering perspective, the tall is in front because there's an invite to walking in through the gate, and then the shorter pieces are on the back, right? Now, I also want to put in a little bit of greenery. Hang on a second here. There we go. A little bit of greenery, and I'm going to, because it's going to be inside, obviously I'm not going to put anything funky or try to grow anything in there. But I've got this one piece that's nice and tall. Now, remember I said this is the tall part and it goes smaller down here? I am actually going to take this piece and make it tall back here in the corner. So what's going to happen here is a little different, where you've got tall, short, and then tall again. And this particular plastic fern thing here moves. So again, you've got the movement going on here. And then you can do some smaller pieces, either along the fence, which looks kind of fun in the corner here. Right? Because you've got enough color between the color of the wagon and the color here. You really don't need any more color, but what this does is it adds the texture that is that's missing. Okay, there. And now that I think about it, I'm going to move my Zen stone, and I'm going to put this here. So I've got the greenery here and my Zen stone. There you go. Makes you want to walk in, sit down, look at the gazing ball, dream, think, kind of imagine what things could be like. And again, something like this to look at when you get home from work puts a smile on your face. This time I'm going to build out a fairy garden for you in a hanging pot. Have you ever thought about putting one in a hanging pot? You can certainly, if you've got animals, dogs that get into things, or cats or squirrels or bunnies, whatever, a hanging basket might be your solution because they will be up off the ground and the critters and animals won't get at them. So what I did with this was, again, I filled it with soil and used my masher and pushed it down. This time I've decided I want my moss to be the same size as the basket, so as the hanging basket. So I'm going to cut it the right size exactly. I'll give you a little tip here. Again, you can use the water to get it in place. If by some chance you cut the moss too short, or you have a spot where you want more moss or whatever, wetting the moss and then pulling it apart to fill in empty spots or to fill in spots that got too small works really well. Again, use your water to wet the moss down and then kind of mush it around so you can get the fill on it. Okay, one thing about hanging baskets is you got to kind of know that they're going to be three-dimensional. They spin around or they move around outside. So instead of using the house, which we're going to put in here as the center point, I'm going to use an arbor. I'm going to start with this and I'm going to build it from here. So I'm going to put that right in the middle because that's going to be my entrance to the fairy garden. I'm going to put the house slightly to the side. And again, you'll see kind of a theme here. I like eclectic things, but I also like things to kind of coordinate too. So I'm kind of showing you both directions. This has got a sunflower, it's got yellow flowers. We're going to go with that. Here is a white fence that we're going to put very close to the back here. So this is the fencing that's going to define the edge of the property, which is kind of fun. And then we've got some colorful flowers here that we're going to put in. And I'm going to put these in right near the fence so that it looks like they're growing right in front of the fence. And again, long stems, but I'm not going to use them quite that long. I'm going to push them down a little bit further so it fits right in there like that. So now I've got the flowers growing along my fence. There we go. I need an entryway. Okay, so I'm going to use some stones, white stones, again, to kind of pull the whole color theme together. And these stones, I'll be real honest, there's some pieces left over from some work that I did in my house where I did a backsplash over my stove. And they have the little things on the back that they come from a home improvement store. But I just cut that off and cut them to size, and these work really good. And I probably don't need quite as many as I have with me, but okay, so there's the entrance, 1, 2, 3. I think I'm only going to use 4, so I've got an extra one, but just so that you can kind of see how the entryway goes. So from here, I have a couple of fairies, I have some color, so I'm going to, this is kind of a bigger fairy piece. She is sitting on a bench and she is talking to the squirrel. So we're going to put her up here near this arbor, and then we're going to put the other one, so this is Krista, and she's going to go in over here near the fence. Again, balance. I don't want all my fairies in the same side. I don't want my houses all on the same side or anything like that. I also have a couple more pieces here. I'm going to put in a birdhouse, and again over here, and push it down a little bit further, and there's my birdhouse. And you'll see that that kind of coordinates with it as well. And then, excuse me, then I've got some silk flowers. Get rid of that. I got some silk flowers that I'm going to put in here. And again, I picked up the colors that were in the flowers here, and I'm going to put them right here, right next to the house. So it picks up the orange that's not only in the flowers, but also in the house. So I've got that one. And then I've got a small yellow one that I'm going to put down here by the arbor. That one doesn't want to go in. It's got a nubby on the bottom. There we go. Okay. I could also do some taller ones and taller flowers and wind them in the arbor as well. And then this one, I got to take a quick look at the front. You know what? I think that's good. I think I probably won't use this one. So again, if you've got pets or if you just have a small space where you don't have a lot of room to have a garden, fairy garden within your garden, a hanging basket works really well. Make sure there's a good liner in it, and you can also put in real flowers too if you want to, real plants, living plants. There you go. We will be back in just a minute. I've got one more to show you. Hi, and welcome back. With the holidays coming up, you might want to do something for with a fairy garden idea for work or for even at home with a holiday theme. So I've got a couple of ideas here for you. So first of all, again, I found this at a thrift store. Never, never underestimate where you're going to find stuff. So I found this cup, huge cup, at a thrift store. It's got kind of a peachy color bottom. I think it's supposed to be a faded pumpkin, but we're going to make it work for us. So what I'm going to do is, again, I filled it with topsoil, with soil, potting soil, and tapped it down. And I'm going to make the base of this straw. So I'm going to just take a bunch of straw and make a mess here, and put the straw on top and cover it. And it doesn't have to be pretty, because you kind of want it to be a little all over the place, right? So we're going to do that. And then I've got a sign, again, great item, that says Happy Halloween. Not too spooky, but just spooky enough. And again, with the hay on there and the straw on there, it stands out. I've got a scarecrow that I'm going to put in here in the back. And then I've got a couple of pumpkins that'll go right in the front here. One and one leaning up against it. Okay? Something very simple that you can do. And again, if you want the straw to be a little more structured, put it on there and give it a good wet down and give it a good spray. So then you have something fun that you can take to the office or put in your kids' room for the holidays, for Halloween, fall Halloween. Now, remember this? We made this a little while ago. I'm going to show you that you don't have to make a separate fairy garden for doing something for the holidays. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to replace this house with this house. Okay? Got it? Okay, and then I'm going to replace this chair and table with this little hay bale and pumpkins and frog on it. I'm going to replace this fairy with a little witch. Okay, I got to look here a second, hang on. Oh, yeah, and then I'm going to leave the doghouse, move it forward a little bit, okay, and then I'm going to put in an even different scarecrow right on the front here, okay. Now, if you see what we did here, we just replaced the house with a different house that's a little more fall-like, added a few pumpkins, added a scarecrow, and you're good to go. Okay? So that's how you can turn an existing fairy garden into one that is good for fall, right? Now, you can also do this in a very similar way for Christmas, where you can take a fairy. Now, you may want to redo for Christmas because you may want to have snow, but you can do a fairy with a snowball, right? You can do a snowman. All of these will work great in existing fairy gardens that you want to make a little bit more seasonal, okay? There's a birdhouse that you can put in here that's got a tree on it. You can do a lamppost with a wreath on it, or you can do a candy cane fence, okay? And just add a candy cane fence. All of these are pieces that you can use in your existing garden. And again, Christmas pieces, you're going to want to make sure you bring them in before it snows because you don't want them buried out there. But maybe what you want to do is build out a basket with the foam, then put a white sheet of snow on it and create it for inside. Hi, welcome back. This is Sharon.
Hi.
When I got here earlier today, she had brought in her dead fairy garden. So we are at the Fairy Garden Hospital right now, and we're going to see what we can do about reviving this, which is, I'm suspecting, not a whole lot. But here's what we need to do. Look at this. I mean, when you look at this, yeah, it's got some issues. But if you look at how well it was put together, she had her flat pieces in the front. She had a patio area. She had a centerpiece with branches and stuff growing over it. She did a great job at putting this together. What happened was she had live plants in here, and for one thing, there's no drainage in this pot. So that was the beginning of the end, basically. You've got to make sure you have drainage in the pot, Sharon. Sorry about that, but that's how it goes. So none of the plants that are in here really are salvageable, but here's the good thing. All of your pieces are still salvageable. So I would recommend taking it totally apart, taking at least the top part of the soil off and getting that out of here. If you decide you want to have live plants in it again, drill a hole in the bottom, okay? But really what you could do is use a moss or use some sort of a mulch at the base and rebuild it from the ground up using these pieces. Okay. So for example, if you kind of take a look at this and see what mulch or what the moss could look like in there, kind of cool looking, isn't it?
Looks
yeah,
good.
And even this could be outdoors as well too. Same thing with using some silks or plastic flowers or plants or whatever, you know, you can get some that would wind through and you'd be putting in something like that, and then you wouldn't have to worry about it. Plus you could bring it in for the fall and bring it in for the winter and enjoy it, right?
That would be
so
nice.
Again, it's the live plant part of it, not salvageable. Everything else is. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you soon.